r/ask Reddit. What do Americans think is normal for everyone, but actually it's not normal for anyone but Americans? Toilet cubicles, where people not only can peek, but an adult person could crawl into your cubicle. There is so much space under the door. Forget under the door. There are like centimeters of space all around the door. I've heard someone say that we are the only ones who drink out of solo cups. Canadians do too. And in Europe when some younger people play beer pong they get them for authenticity. Other than that, yes, North Americans are the only ones as far as I know. Yeah, we use them for beer pong here in Europe, mostly knockoffs though, but that's just because the standard here is like 0.2L plastic cups, which are way harder to throw ping pong balls into. Generally you can't buy them as disposable cups in the supermarket though, and you have to buy some sort of beer pong set. Portion sizes. The first meal for any foreigner should be the Cheesecake Factory because their portions are huge and because it's all uphill from there. The ducking menu alone is massive. Not putting the final price on the tag. I'm not sure whether it's still like this, but a few years ago one never knew whether the $1 item in McDonald's or Burger King is actually $1 or maybe $1.08. That's the same in Canada. Most places don't include the tax and I wish they did. Putting a ton of sugar in products like bread. In America, it's corn syrup. My maternity leave was an unpaid 6 weeks, and I had to fight them on not shorting me because I went past my due date and didn't keep working until the day I went into labor. This comment is very underrated. Maternity leave is a joke in the US, and you can forget about paternity leave. I know someone that went into labor while at work, grocery store, and she was back in a couple weeks because she used up her 2 weeks vacation. Agree. It should be much higher. 6 weeks is a ducking joke compared to most civilized countries. It's shameless how little support workers get in the US. I'm never going to understand how Americans keep having babies when it seems like everything is so difficult concerning pregnancy, labor and children. Having to work up until you give birth. Insane medical bill from giving birth. Barely having recovered from labor until you have to go back to work. Insane childcare costs, etc. I mean, in my country you can't even put a baby that's younger than 9 months old to daycare. The idea of going back to work when your baby is only a few weeks old is crazy to me. Not to mention having no safety nets if you have children and happen to get sick or lose your job. Gratuitous violence and entertainment is normal, but show one boob and people lose their shit. I read an article last year about how in American Horror Story they played a 4-minute long scene of Lady Gaga's character slashing throats and drinking blood during an orgy, but the song playing in the background had the word ducking censored. American censorship standards are wild. Ambulance rides costing money seems pretty absurd to people from other countries. I've heard of people getting Ubers instead of getting an ambulance because it costs so much. Yep, my roommate was really sick once. I got an Uber and took her to the hospital because an ambulance would have cost $1,000 instead of $15. This one is more on the positive side, because I think we could learn some from it. Talking and sharing your life with complete strangers. I have met quite a few Americans, so it seems the norm that you share and engage with strangers in public, the bus, train, parks, etc. And then you go on your way. In Denmark you'd be a freak if you did that. I lived in Ireland for a while, and when I was first there I was always looking around. So it was obvious I wasn't from there. During this time old people would sit next to me on the bus and tell me their life story rather frequently. As soon as I started looking like every other office drone it stopped. Having only 2 parties, Republicans and Democrats. I know there are some smaller parties, but the system is stacked against them. The bipartisan system is messed up. The idea that Americans have a literal red versus blue mentality with their own country and are willing to pick sides so vehemently and aggressively boggles my mind. Attack ads against political opponents. Ads for law firms or lawyers. These kinds of ads are illegal and considered unethical in our country. Also expecting a teenager to be out of the house by the time they're 18. I live in Southeast Asia. There's no stigma about living with one's parents. Most of the time, there will be 3 generations living in one house. Being able to vote before reaching the legal drinking age. Fun fact, drinking voting, and the draft all used to be 21. The draft age was lowered during World War II by FDR to meet the demand for more troops. They only lowered the voting age with the passing of the 26th Amendment in 1971, and they lowered it to 18 to match the draft age. Since it was real shitty to die for your country but not be able to vote, states then started dropping the drinking age to 18 to match the draft age. Then Mothers Against Drunk Driving helped lead the charge to raise the drinking age back to 21 in 1984. Asking everyone what do you do when you first meet them. I live outside the US and realized there are some people I've known for years and I still don't know their job. I think in the US jobs are a bigger part of a person's identity than in some other places. We also do that in France. Two-phase quadrants levy, which literally means what do you do in life, XD. Extra large bottomless cups for cola or soft drinks. You could bathe in those. Actively avoiding healthcare visits, checkups, because if there's something wrong and you don't have the money to pay for treatment, then you'd rather just not know. Or because we get gaslighted into believing that it's no big deal or that we're even a burden for showing up to the doctor's office in the first place. American flags everywhere. I traveled throughout Europe and the Caribbean and I usually only saw their flag on government buildings and here and there. Whereas here in the USA the flag is like Frank's Red Hot. We put that shit on everything. Magnets, churches, cars, condoms, every front porch, and street lamp. Murica. Damn. I throw out a random comment and get 9k likes. Also, I feel like this thread became a subreddit for Canada. Some other countries do this too. In Canada, for example, they strategically put the Canadian flag and maple leaf everywhere. Even in logos, for example. Canadian McDonald's has a maple leaf in its logo, and most of my Canadian friends had never even noticed when I mentioned it. Having police patrol the school. My school has a security guard whose job is to make sure kids don't walk out the front door before the last bell. He's very nice. Just dealing with preventable and curable diseases instead of seeking medical attention out of fear of crippling debt. One of the biggest things I feel those against access to healthcare being a right miss is that there are so many little things that happen to people that if they just got them checked out early it would be a cheap fix. If they could take a little time off to rest after an injury or illness. Instead we just have people ignore small treatable issues until they become big chronic issues that require some form of regular maintenance or care. When I went to New York I was flabbergasted by the amount of people just loitering on the streets or having phone conversations that everyone can hear on the train like NPCs from GTA. People outside of the USA don't hang out in public or let other people into their business on public transport. I managed to hear a woman talk about how her baby daddy wasn't going to her daughter's birthday party and I started to pick sides in her personal life. While walking through Central Park I heard two friends with a substantial age gap talk about everyone in their friend group having mistresses and they were trading information on the mistress facts each of them knew for their respective friends. I got invested in that one so I followed them for a while, pretending I wasn't, because I wanted the tea. While this isn't exclusive to NYC, as a New Yorker I can tell you that it is much more common in the city than in most places in the USA. Frankly it comes down to a space issue. Most people don't have big apartments. Many people have roommates. Our offices are small. So if we have to have a rough conversation the choice is sometimes between let everyone in my living situation know about something personal I don't want them to or let some people that will never see me again know. A flag in every corner of a classroom, and Americans being very patriotic to the stars and stripes. Other countries barely give a poop about their flags. As an American I was shocked to learn that not every school internationally has a building cop. In Australia we have good old Constable Watch's name come down like once a year to give a lecture on how drugs are bad. That's the only cops I've ever seen at school. Willingly putting yourself massively in debt for a college degree. I come from a place with free university education, which has its own drawbacks of course. And the fact that you can make such a huge, life-altering decision at 17 is considered normal over there. That seems downright bizarre to me. Agree, this is ridiculous. Especially with taking decades to pay off. A lot of times that teenager changes their career path or doesn't even use the degree. Pledge to the flag in class. When I first saw footage of Pledge of Allegiance, I thought I was watching some dystopia fiction, like 1984. I attended a church rally in Austin, TX on Independence Day about 15 years ago, and they did the whole Pledge of Allegiance thing. After the procession of veterans across the stage, the entire congregation stood as one and recited it word for word. Then the pastor gave a very political sermon. Speaking as a Scot, it has to be one of the most surreal experiences of my life. That the entire traffic has to stop when a school bus stops. I've seen this a few times on r/idiotsnkers, and there is always a debate about how it's not normal outside of the US. Well, there's a lot of idiots in cars in America, and there have been many deaths due to drivers ignoring when school buses stop to let kids on. Lady killed about 3 kids last year due to that. The enabling customer service culture. It's created excessive portions in restaurants. Created Karen. Gives way to a disposable attitude towards products. And generally gives a sense of entitlement where most people start adding it to their list of rights. Casually driving a couple hours. Cause are so ubiquitous and stuff is so spread out a lot of the time we don't even think about travel and distance, but instead in driving time. Driving 2 hours on a weekend for random day trip doesn't seem like anything of note. Driving 8 hours is a long trip but not really a huge deal. Whoa, you made it to the end? You're a ducking beast. I'll cuss you a deal. Smash like and subscribe for more curated content, bruh. It's free and that's a great price.